Hello, and welcome to the Embrace Balance, Discover Joy podcast. I'm Amanda Butland, your host and intuitive life coach. All right, welcome to another episode of the Embrace Balance, Discover Joy podcast. Today, my special guest is Lakshmi Srinivasan. Lakshmi, so great to have you on with me today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Great. So I always like to start with a little icebreaker question. Can you share with us what activity or hobby brings you the most joy and why?
Okay, I may have two, and not just one. Right now I'm learning a Filipino-based martial art. It's called Lakas martial art. It's been an intense journey for me trying to get my body to a state where I think I can actually do martial arts. So it just gives me so much joy in knowing that my body can actually withstand the level of challenges that the martial art this particular martial art brings, right? So I'm just loving that. It also feeds into the masculine aspect of who I am. So I'm like loving that. The other part or the other activity that I'm also starting to explore is, and it's more of an energy practice. And so I'm starting to discover my own abilities to like dig into my intuitive skills and like to channel and to like work with energy, and to work with like light codes and things like that. So I'm it's all new, and so it's extremely interesting, and it feeds the feminine side of who I am. So yeah, there you go. Those are my two fun things that I'm doing at the moment.
That's fun. I love what you shared around like the martial art being very physical and feeding your or supporting your masculine side, and then sort of that spiritual energy type stuff feeding your feminine side, which really creates a great balance between the two within yourself, right? Like you're creating that an amazing balance within yourself by by having these two amazing things that are fun and new and enjoyable, and you're having a lot of fun with them. So I love that.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
It's been a process of discovery.
So we're here to talk about coaching. Can you share a little bit about maybe your experiences with coaching and how it's impacted your life?
Yeah. So, my very first form of coaching that I remember was mostly at a professional setting. I had started working at this organization, and it was my year one, and I was like, I need to grow, and I need to figure out how I move through the corporate ladder. And so at that point in time, I was very narrowly focused on like, okay, here's the next milestone, here's the next title, here's the next role that I want to get to, right? And I did that. I want to say I did that for a good 2 years. And I felt like I was still missing something. Um, and I remember going with my coach at that point to to like one of these casual coffee meets, and and I remember my coach being specific, or rather asking the question, how are things in your personal life? And I was like, what has this got to do with like me getting my next promotion? Right? Like, I mean, like you're not getting into my personal boundary, and I don't feel comfortable with that. And I want to say that um I took a leap of faith in that in my coach asking that question. And I went on to share some personal background around where I was at that point in time. So full disclosure, I was just coming back from a maternity leave. I was still trying to juggle the corporate lifestyle, and trying to progress in my career, and also embody the whole motherhood, and also like I was also on a breastfeeding journey. So it's like trying to balance, I want to say like 5 or 6 pillars. It seemed like a lot, right? I also want to throw in like the sleep cycle. I also want to throw in like the relationship with my husband. Like all of those are pillars, for lack of a better word. And it was a lot. And that particular conversation um, translated to a little more than just like professional coaching, right? I think it just opened up a very different side of coaching, or a very different side of a conversation that then, I mean, I look back now, this was like 10 years ago. I look back now and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so glad that conversation happened, because if I had just stuck to a very professional narrative and a very professional, um, no, like, yeah, professional life is fantastic. And if I just like made it a very simplified statement, like the conversation would have just ended there, and she would have, like, my coach would have just given me like, okay, here are probably like the things you can try out. And then if this ain't working, like maybe go look for a different job, right? But that particular that particular item of what's happening in your personal life, where are you, like, it just opened up a very different um avenue. And I look back and I'm like super grateful that my coach even asked that question. So long story short, um although a lot of these a lot of times coaching can look like, here is the next goal that you're trying to accomplish and let me help you get there. But it's a very whole-rounded aspect, and you just can't achieve your goal. Like, you just can't have that tunnel vision and achieve your goal. You need to look at the supporting systems and the supporting things that build you up as to who you are, to ensure that you're able to fully move forward and achieve that goal.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that journey and that story. It's very inspiring to see, how just that one, expanding that relationship from just the specific professional to, opening up a little bit, like really helped you see things, and how like there are a lot of other parts that are involved in growing in your career. It's not just focusing on just those specific professional goals. So I loved you sharing that. So I wanted to come back to what you said there towards the end around, having all those other parts of life um, that really are needed, like that whole support system of those other areas, like you mentioned, like your relationship with your husband and the whole
Mhm.
motherhood thing, and all these pieces. They need to be looked at, right? When it's not just focused on just what's my next step in my career, because all of those other areas are impacted, or all those things can impact your job. So I love that. And I'm just curious, as you were working through, it sounded like that you were then starting to work on all those different pieces. Can you talk a little bit more about that holistic part, and how that sort of all came together?
Yeah. Oh wow, it's been a journey. I look back and I'm like, oh goodness. So, so I want to start off by saying that um anytime you are in any sort of a relationship, right, be it at a workplace or be it in your personal life, you're always going to have challenges. And um these challenges present a fantastic opportunity to figure out this to figure out who is this human being that you're interacting with, or to figure out something about yourself, right? And when I look back at all of the challenges that I've navigated so far at my workplace, with my husband, with my kids, all of the figuring out had to be like within myself, right? They were just being who they were being. Most of the things were all assumptions, beliefs, and things that I had brought into the relationship with them. Um, so as I so as I was working through my career and figuring out how I could achieve the success that I needed in my career, it became super obvious to me that my relationship with my husband, who I'm married to like now for 15 years, and at that point in time we were like 3 or 4 years into our marriage. um it was slightly on shaky grounds because we just had a new baby, and we had not had the opportunity to like sit down and visit very fundamental things like okay, who's going to do the nighttime feeding and who's going to do like the morning time feeding? And well, you are in a very extremely challenging job. And so like, do we have additional support? And who's going to do the laundry? Who's going to do the cooking? Right. So like some of those things like put us in a very, I want to say rocky point, at a rocky point, right? Added to that, just going through the motherhood and the hormonal changes and me trying to like be the overachiever of like, I got to breastfeed my baby. Like, I don't care what it takes. If it means like I got to pump like 10 times, I'm going to do it just because the doctor said so. Totally unnecessary, right? If I look back, it's like totally unnecessary. Yes, the doctor says it, but can your body sustain it? No, then you know what? A fed baby is a happy baby, right? But there are so many things that are imposed on us that I just took on as like this is the way it has to be. Like my rigidity towards making it happen, and my again the overachiever in me is like no, this is the only way, didn't necessarily help. And so two things came out of the coaching, right, for me. One is just the pure awareness of my rigidity. And number two, um, there is always a third way to solving the challenge. And and yes, we still, I'm not saying my life is perfect. We still have challenges right now. But our relationship is my relationship, be it at workplace or be it with respect to my husband and my kids who are now like extremely independent and they have a voice of their own, they have a mind of their own, is way healthier than what it would have been if I had stayed on to that 10-year-old version of myself, right? Um, and it's all been a journey of embodying what my other coaches had to say, what my other mentors have to say, and just being open to the fact that there is a different perspective which may not be the same as mine, and learning to accept it and see and take whatever parts of it that resonates with me and leave whatever does not, right? um so yeah, I mean that, and so yes, today we're still happily married. We go through phases of like you are the best mom to like yeah, I like you sort of a situation with my kids. um but for the most part, at the end of the day, I'm genuinely happy with who I am being as part of this process and with all of the relationships that I have in my life right now.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. That's just so amazing. And I wanted to touch back on something that you said a little bit earlier, and it sort of circles back to what you just said. But you said that like when you thought about in the beginning, right? Before you went through this, you were looking at how other people were interacting with you and maybe trying to make other people happy or whatever it was. But then you said, then but you had to look inward because
Mhm.
that's really where the work is. I want to talk a little bit more about that inside work because it's true, right? When
Mhm.
you think about what life coaches' jobs are, um, it's not really to help you solve external problems. It is to help you look
Mhm.
inward, right? And reflect and figure out what's going on the inside. So can you talk a little bit more about sort of that inside work that you did to help you get to this place where you are today, or like this amazing life that you have with these relationships that you have with your family and your coworkers?
Sure. Um, so this is how I'm going to categorize it. The the way I have embodied the inside work is at two levels, right? There is the 2D or the physical realm sort of inside work, right? And I'll tell you what I mean by that. And then there is the energetic work that's also needed in order to support the 2D being of you. For example, um, we have a pathetic morning routine in our household. I start my day super early. I am on calls from 5 all the way till 8 o'clock. So by the time I get to 8 o'clock and it's time to drop the kids off, like it's World War III every morning, right? No surprises. I'm thinking most of the households have the same situation. Um, the 2D version of me, the inside work that was needed, it's still work in process, right? Like every year is a different year as the kids grow. But the true inside work that was needed for me to do was to take a step back and put myself as the receiver and put myself in the shoes of my kids and say, how are these kids feeling at 8 o'clock in the morning? They want mommy time. They want to have they want to have their decent time with me in terms of, be it reading a book or having breakfast, or like, or maybe it's like sometimes just hugs and kisses, right? Um, and so how can I incorporate that into their morning routine before I actually just go wake? Or does it mean like I wake them up 15 minutes early so that we can actually meet their needs first in the morning and then start the school routine, and then go drop them off? Um, it is, we've also made minor changes, like, okay, each child gets to pick their own playlist as we drive to school in the morning. So that just creates that, okay, yeah, like mommy's listening to our playlist and not like mommy's listening to her own playlist, or mommy's on a call, right? So that's now this came about because I was able to look at my 2D version, take a step back and say, what can I do to create a better morning routine for my kids? But um the the version of me that needed to implement the 2D version, which is the higher version of myself, needed to recognize that I needed to own my own morning practices so that I could show up to fill the buckets of these kids, right? What that meant is, now I get up at 4 o'clock, I go fill my own buckets. I make sure my energy is at the highest and the fullest level, which includes like a workout and my meditation practice and whatever books and whatever reading or drawing or whatever it is that I want to do in the morning before I actually present myself to my kids. So effectively, um, and that again required a lot of inner work, but at an energetic level, right? So having that awareness that we are 2D beings, and then there is also the energy and how we behave and how we present ourselves that also affects like the people around us. And so when you look at inner work, you almost have to look at it as two separate, and sometimes it can be more than two. But for me, thankfully, it's just, well, actually, no, it's actually four. There are like four different beings inside of me, right? Because there is the 2D masculine version, there's the 2D feminine version, and there is the masculine energetic version, and then there is the feminine energetic version. So I have to make sure all these four parts of me talk to each other, are in agreement with each other before they are ready to go mingle with the external world. But that's the inner work that you have to do. Um,
Yeah, I love what you shared around sort of explaining how that process came about. And I wanted to touch back on what you said around how you get up an extra hour earlier, or an hour before, just to do your work, your morning routine before the kids are up, because you want to have that full cup so that you
mhm.
can come with come like bring your most and best self to them, and help them with their, or serve them as you're helping them meet their needs before they head off to school, because that's so important, right? I think a lot of people forget that you sort of have to fill your own cup before you can help and serve others. So I love that you built that into your morning, to do that work. And I love I love what you described your four internal beings. And I
Yeah, and I
love
think I must say, the entire recognition around filling your cup yourself and having that compassion for yourself when one part of yourself is not ready to show up for whatever reason, um and not necessarily blaming or shaming that part or making it like someday you just have a bad day at like your very first office meeting doesn't go as productive as you planned, and like you just have to recognize it and stop feeling bad about it, and then just keep going, right? So and where I was getting with that is it's this might be a hard concept for people who don't necessarily go through the coaching or the mentor journey to recognize that these parts even exist for themselves, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where that helping hand or the role of a coach becomes super important. um because given the nature of challenge or whatever, I mean, yes, it all starts with a problem statement, but the root cause or the driver of that problem actually is elsewhere. And it's extremely hard for you to take a flashlight and look inside of you and figure out where that root cause is. You almost need another person or another being who's not living in the same ecosystem as you, to like be at a different level, and then shine the flashlight and say, okay, so here is like this area where I think you're like, here is like the really dirty place that I know you don't want to get to, but I think it'll be really worth it if you tried looking there. Or it's like, okay, here is like the shiny area that you think is super shiny, but like if you dust it off, it's just like rust, right? So, and I think that's where um your coach can really be valuable. That is assuming you're open to feedback, right? Because this whole relationship between me and my coach and me and my mentor worked because I was truly, truly open to receiving feedback and taking it in a way that I could then do something about it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're right, because I think that one of the roles of the coach is to challenge, right? Is to not just hear what you're saying and take it as truth, right? Because there are, like you said earlier, like sort of at the beginning, there are going to be false beliefs that are there, or things that you think are truths, but really it's just how your interpretation of a situation, right? So
Mhm,
until, like you said, that light is shined on that area, you're not
mhm,
necessarily going to know it's there. So I
mhm.
love that you shared that piece around sort of how what one of the roles of the coach is in that situation. So I wanted to touch back to something that you had earlier said about sort of those four beings inside of you, and how all of them sort of, you need to bring them all to the net to the level where you can come as a whole being to help your kids in the morning. And like you said, not all of them always have to be in agreement. Sometimes one's not really great, but I did want to touch back on sort of that energy component of sort of our beings, um because you're right, like you mentioned, it's some people are not aware that that's even a thing, that they're only looking at the physical. But can you talk a little bit more maybe about sort of that energy part of us as beings?
Yeah, so this is still a very new area for me, right? Like I'm still learning more about myself, and every um everything that I discover is still like, oh my God, really? Wow, that's exciting. So, so here is my view of how I look at who I am. Like if I have to define energy, like using an energy sort of a definition, who I am, this is how I would put it, right? Um, every human being has a masculine and a feminine side, right? And especially as a woman who is in the corporate world, for sure, my masculine side is like super dominant. That's the side that keeps me alive. That's the side that keeps me protected when I'm walking alone on the street at like 10 o'clock at night. Don't ask me what I'm doing at that time, but whatever, right? Um, there's also there's also the feminine side of me, the one that truly enjoys like having bubble baths with my daughter, the one that takes my son out for feather hunting, the one that loves to go on a bike ride with my kids, right? So that's like the masculine and feminine side of me. um there are very specific activities um that feed into the energy being of my masculine and the energy being of my feminine. Um, for example, anytime I'm learning something new, I am those kind of activities charge my masculine energy. So things like, well, I don't know how to swim, right? So when I tried learning how to swim, that side, just think of it as a Tesla charger, right? Like anytime I went and tried a new activity, like my masculine energy would get charged up. My martial arts absolutely charge up, right? Um, Anytime I'm doing something intense, something um like hiking, climbing Mission Peak, or powerlifting, absolutely feeds my masculine energy. So what that does is then when I get to doing my very masculine task at work, like leading meetings, managing escalations at work, um, dealing with um, dealing with negotiations with my, I'm in the house building process, so dealing with negotiations with my contractor, like all of those activities feeds the masculine being of me, which allows me to show up differently, right? In on a day-to-day basis. The the feminine side of me, the Tesla recharge to charge my feminine energy part is very different. I I paint, I do a lot of doodle work, I draw mandalas, I meditate, I do full moon and new moon meditations. I sit in sacred feminine circles. And that fill that charges me differently. It charges me with how do I say this? Well, it charges me the way, you would go fill a gas. You go fill a like your regular car, right? So where I'm going with this is, um, as a human being, we all have masculine and feminine energy. And it is super important to figure out which activity is going to function as the Tesla charger and which activity for you is going to function as refueling your regular gas car, right? And each of those will then allow you to show up differently, either as the mother, the nurturer, the teacher, the in conversations with your daycare provider, in conversations with your child's swimming coach versus like negotiating with a contractor on a bid, right? Um, and again, this awareness, um, it requires it requires training on a daily basis to strengthen that skill and to strengthen that intuitive feeling um because today you have very specific guidelines on how to be masculine and how to be feminine. Like they'll absolutely teach you what it means to be a masculine being in a workplace and how to negotiate for like higher salary, but it's very hard to figure out what your masculine energy being and what your feminine energy being is, because at the end of the day it's truly what your heart wants to do, right? And um so this is my recipe for who I am, and that may be very different for who you, Amanda, are, right? um and so you have to constantly work and strengthen that awareness and that intuition feeling to figure out, um is this activity or is this interaction feeding me positively, or is it not feeding me positively? And if it is feeding me positively, which part of me is it charging? Is it the feminine side or is it the masculine side?
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I love that you sort of described that and the filling up of the two different parts. And I mean, it circles back to, the original question when I asked what the two things are that bring you joy, and it was those two things that, that you're using to fill both of those. So, I
Yeah.
love that we sort of came full circle on that. So that's this is great. I love what you said about, everybody's different. So whatever it is, you have to figure out what it is that's your thing that's going to fill both of your sides. And I love that there are two sides because, like the podcast title is embracing the balance, is
Hmm.
you always have to fill both sides. You can't just fill just one side and leave the other one empty, right? It does, you have to pay attention to both. Um, there's just not, you can't just, ignore one side, because like you said earlier, that side will then just not be in its best self, and then you end up being, whatever, cranky or in not the best mood because you're out of balance, you're in imbalanced. um
That is so true. And that actually was one of my biggest um, surprises or discoveries from coaching, right? Um, the essence of staying in a balanced state is so critical to your overall well-being. Um, and I didn't know that till somebody else, till my coach actually showed me on um, how to actually live a life that way, right? The other piece also is um, opening up yourself to try new things. Because unless you try new things, you're really not going to know what is it that you really enjoy doing. And that I think that's what life is all about. Like we're always juggling multiple priorities. We're always like juggling different roles and identities and who we are. But at the end of the day, like you have to try different things out. Um, and for me, the very first different thing that I tried was coaching, which then just opened up like a bunch of other different roads and channels and doors. And I was like, oh, great, here we go. Let's go explore this. And I was like, oh, I love this. And sometimes I've been a very like, no, I do not want to do this at all. But yeah, I mean, that's what it takes to come back to that center or come back to that state of balance.
yeah, I love what you just said though about how, sort of coaching was the thing that sort of opened you up to seeing all these things. I'm curious, what was it that allowed you to say yes to coaching in the beginning?
I was so tired of trying
Mhm.
to figure this out on my own. Um, it's I don't know who or when this whole um mission was started around asking for help is a sign of weakness.
Mm.
And I held on to that for a very long time. And it was extremely exhausting and overwhelming for me to just figure everything out on my own. Um, and especially at a workplace where I know that I'm being evaluated, I'm being rated, I'm being graded, I'm like somebody else would love to have my job. It just seemed extremely um not the right thing to do to ask for help. Um, which is why I decided to, oh, the whole mentorship and coaching at a workplace seemed like a great idea. Um, but one of the things that I have realized, and I think for me, and I go back to what I had originally or initially said, um, being open and being vulnerable and truly stating how I felt in my personal life really and pushed me to move towards a better and a positive direction, right? Like that was my moment of um making a drastic shift in my entire coaching relationship. And it took a lot of like there was a part of me that's like, are you really sure you want to do this? Like, are you really sure you want to tell your coach how your personal life is? Like, is it really worth it? But I look back and I'm like, oh my God, like that took some courage and have and like just being in that vulnerable state has opened up so many doors for me today, right? Um, but yeah, I mean, I was just sick and tired of trying to do this, trying to figure it out. And today, I mean, I look at my life right now and I have a personal trainer. He is like I call him my health coach. He makes sure that my body is great and like um I can do like 100 jumping jacks. Right? He makes sure that my diet is healthy and it supports it supports all of the physical activities that I want to do. Um, I have a coach for my workplace situations who helps me with like any professional aspects that I want to troubleshoot. I also sometimes use a business coach. I sometimes work with other coaches to help certain small businesses. So I mean, it's like today I'm not shy of asking for help.
Mm,
And it's taken me a very long time, but I recognize that there are people who are really good at it. And so why not capitalize on their expertise and gain the knowledge and have them evaluate the blind spots that you're truly missing at this point in time.
mm. Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it has been something that somehow showed up in society where asking for help is a weakness. And I love how you've been able to work through that and now see how much more you can grow when you do seek out others that have, done it before and have this
Mhm.
expertise and can help you sort of, like move faster because, you're not struggling by yourself trying to figure it out on your own. So I love that. So I'm going to start wrapping up. Is there anything else that you sort of want to share with the audience today? Anything that's on your mind that you'd like to just put out there?
Let's see. I would say that if anyone's listening to this and wondering, you know what, I don't think this is for me. Like I don't run a small business. I don't work in corporate. I'm just a stay-at-home mom or whatever, right? Like you can come up with a million reasons to say why this is not for you. I'm actually going to challenge you to say, um, think of one area of your life you drastically want to improve, one area of your life that keeps repeating over and over and over, and you're sick and tired of it, and you want to improve, and use that as your starting point to explore coaching. Like you will be so amazed and surprised at what you'll discover about yourself or about the situation. Um, so yeah, I think that's the only thing I'll ask for the listeners to do.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And it's been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for being with me today and sharing your journey and sharing your story with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you.
I invite you to subscribe to the Embrace Balance Discover Joy podcast and join our community. If you feel inspired by what you hear, please leave a review and share this podcast with others who might benefit. And remember, it's never too late to embrace balance and discover joy in your life. Stay tuned for our upcoming episodes filled with inspiring stories and valuable insights. Until next time, take care and be kind to yourself.